When Lisa complained of a persistent and sharp throat pain, her mother, Margaret, knew she couldn't take any chances. As a single mother with 3 daughters, Lisa, Winter, and Chrislyn, Margaret often juggled her responsibilities with unwavering determination. Concerned for Lisa's health, she packed her daughters into their weathered family car and drove to the emergency room, hoping for nothing more than a routine examination and some quick relief for her eldest daughter. The OR was bustling with activity, and a cacophony of voices echoed in the sterile, white-tiled corridors. Eventually, the nurse directed Margaret and her girls to a small examination room with pale blue walls and a faint scent of antiseptic. The sisters perched anxiously on plastic chairs, their eyes darting around with nervous curiosity. When Dr. William entered the room, he cut an impressive figure. Tall and confident, with a warm but professional demeanor, he greeted them with a smile that seemed reassuring. Margaret felt a glimmer of relief until things took a strange turn. After a brief discussion, Dr. William turned his focus solely on Lisa. He asked Margaret, quite abruptly, if he could examine the girl privately in his office just beyond the hallway door. The request felt off. There was no sugarcoating it. Doctors rarely needed privacy with children without a guardian present. An uneasy silence hung between them, and Margaret's instincts screamed at her to refuse. But the doctor's credentials and polished presence swayed her after all. He was a professional. She reluctantly agreed and remained in the waiting room with Winter and Chrislyn, trying to calm her frayed nerves. Minutes ticked by. At first, the waiting room's droning clock and murmur of distant voices were a welcome distraction, but then came an unexpected sound, a muffled, peculiar noise, as if something was being forcibly moved or resisted. The hair on the back of Margaret's neck stood on end. She felt a mother's intuition roaring inside her. Panic tightened her chest. Something was wrong. Acting quickly, she pulled out her phone, her hands trembling as she hit the record button. She couldn't shake the thought that if her suspicions were wrong, she'd look foolish. But if they weren't, if Lisa was in danger, then this footage might be her only protection. Margaret rushed to the doctor's office, the hallway stretching endlessly before her. Her footsteps echoed with urgency, her heartbeat pounding like a drum. She didn't bother knocking. She flung open the door with a force she didn't know she possessed. What she saw inside was beyond anything she could have imagined. Dr. William was not performing a routine examination. He was hunched over a tray of sinister-looking medical tools that no child should ever see. Lisa stood on the far side of the room, visibly terrified, her small frame trembling. The doctor's expression caught halfway between surprise and menace, betrayed intentions far darker than anyone could have guessed. Margaret's phone captured everything, the sterile instruments glinting ominously under fluorescent lights, the flicker of raw fear in Lisa's eyes, and the doctor's attempt to shield his actions. The footage was jarring, raw, and powerful. It was a mother's primal instinct intersecting with technology and a quest for justice. The world would soon see the footage and react with outrage. Social media lit up like wildfire, news outlets picked up the story, and public protests demanded accountability and change. Dr. William's secrets unraveled. It turned out Lisa was not the first victim lured behind closed doors. But thanks to her brave mother, she would be the last. Margaret's decision to trust her instincts and act despite her doubts set a precedent that resonated far and wide. It was a reminder of the strength that lay within those who refuse to be silent when something feels terribly wrong. The fallout from Margaret's discovery was immediate and seismic. The video she recorded was raw and unfiltered, spreading rapidly through social media. Within hours, it became the center of public outrage, and within days, it was the spark for a full-scale investigation that brought the weight of justice crashing down on Dr. William. As investigators delved deeper, chilling truths emerged. Dr. William had a long history of complaints that had been buried beneath bureaucratic red tape and professional connections. Previous victims had attempted to speak out, but their voices were lost in the labyrinth of medical boards and legal loopholes. Now, with the public firmly fixed on his actions and the evidence indisputable, there was no escape. The doctor was arrested and charged with multiple counts of misconduct, malpractice, and criminal behavior. For Margaret, the aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. There was relief and almost overwhelming sense of gratitude that she had followed her instincts. But there was also the harrowing realization of how close Lisa had come to being deeply harmed. In the days that followed, Margaret found herself juggling interviews with police, child welfare specialists, and reporters. Everyone wanted to know what drove her to act with such courage and clarity in the face of uncertainty. Her answer was always the same: a mother always knows. Despite her newfound status as a hero, Margaret struggled. The spotlight was harsh and her family's privacy was suddenly in tatters. There were supportive messages from people around the world, but there were also trolls, skeptics, and armchair critics who questioned her decisions. It was a burden, and at times, it felt like too much. But Margaret stood firm. Her daughters were her world, and no amount of public scrutiny could shake her resolve to protect them. Lisa, meanwhile, faced her own challenges. The trauma of that day lingered in unexpected ways. Nightmares haunted her sleep, and the mere sight of a doctor's office filled her with dread. Therapy sessions became a crucial part of her recovery. Margaret ensured that Lisa, Winter, and Chrislyn all had the support they needed, determined to help them find strength amid the turmoil. Over time, Margaret's courage began to inspire change on a broader scale. The footage she captured forced hospitals and medical boards across the country to review their policies. New protocols were introduced, mandating that parents or guardians be present during pediatric exams unless explicitly waived. Reporting mechanisms for suspicious behavior were improved, and whistleblowers were given greater protections. Margaret found herself at the forefront of a movement for transparency and accountability in the healthcare system. She spoke at rallies, shared her story in interviews, and even testified before a legislative committee pushing for stricter medical oversight. Her message was clear and powerful: trust is sacred, and when it is broken, there must be consequences. One rainy afternoon, months after that harrowing day at the Margaret and her daughters sat together in their living room. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence they'd faced, but also reminded them of how far they'd come. Lisa, now stronger and more resilient, looked at her mother and asked, "Why did you come in when you did?" Margaret's eyes welled with tears as she hugged her daughter tightly. "Because I love you more than anything," she whispered. "And I will always be there when you need me." Life eventually settled into a new normal. The shadows of that day never fully disappeared, but they grew smaller as time passed. Margaret and her daughters found ways to reclaim their joy, to laugh, to heal. And in moments of quiet reflection, Margaret would look at her three girls, Lisa, Winter, and Chrislyn, and feel a fierce pride. They had endured darkness, but together, they had become the light that pierced it. In a world that often looked the other way, they had chosen to see, to act, and to speak out. And in doing so, they had changed not just their own lives, but countless others. They were living proof that even in the face of fear, love and courage could prevail. Months turned into years, but the ripple effects of that fateful day in the continued to transform not just Margaret's family, but also the broader community. While Dr. William faced the full weight of the law, eventually convicted and serving a lengthy prison sentence, Margaret and her daughters worked tirelessly to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Lisa's recovery was a long road, marked by moments of progress and setbacks. Therapy was a lifeline, helping her confront her fears, process the trauma, and learn coping mechanisms to navigate the shadows that lingered. Over time, she found her voice again, literally and figuratively. Where there was once hesitation and anxiety, a spark of determination began to shine through. Lisa wanted to turn her experience into something meaningful, something that would ensure no other child had to endure what she did. At just 13 years old, she gave her first speech at a public awareness event, her small frame standing confidently behind a podium. Her words were raw but powerful, She spoke about the fear she felt, the importance of trusting her instincts, and the strength she drew from her mother's bravery. The crowd hung on every word, moved by her courage. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Margaret and her daughters soon found themselves at the heart of a growing movement. Together, they established a nonprofit organization called Light in the Shadows, dedicated to supporting survivors of medical misconduct and advocating for policy reform. The organization quickly gained traction, partnering with hospitals, schools, and government agencies to create educational programs focused on patient rights and safety. Winter and Chrysalin, who had witnessed their sister's trauma and their mother's determination, were inspired to play active roles in the cause. Winter, known for her artistic talents, created powerful visual campaigns that spread across social media, raising awareness about the importance of vigilance in medical settings. Her artwork, often centered on themes of light overcoming darkness, became a symbol of hope and resilience. Chrysalin, the youngest, used her natural empathy and warmth to connect with other children who had experienced trauma. She became a peer counselor within their community, helping younger kids express their fears and find strength in their own voices. Despite her youth, she had a way of making others feel heard, understood, and empowered. As Light in the Shadows grew, so did its impact. Marginalized communities, often overlooked and underrepresented in healthcare discussions, found a platform to share their stories. Legislation began to change, driven by tireless lobbying efforts and public demand for accountability. In hospitals across the country, mandatory cameras were installed in examination rooms, ensuring transparency and patient safety. Margaret, while proud of the movement, remained deeply committed to her role as a mother. She balanced the public demands of advocacy with the private needs of her daughters, often sacrificing her own comfort for their well-being. At night, when the house was quiet, she would reflect on how far they had come. The scars left by that day were still there, but they had become symbols of survival and transformation. One summer afternoon, Margaret was invited to speak at a major healthcare conference. Standing before an audience of doctors, policymakers, and survivors, she shared her story once more. But this time, she focused not only on the horror and betrayal they faced, but on the resilience and hope that followed. She spoke of how one moment of courage could create a lifetime of change, and how love and yielding and fierce could move mountains. When she finished, there was a standing ovation. As the applause subsided, a young doctor approached her with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said, "because of your work, we're learning to be better, to protect and to listen." The weight of his words sank in. Margaret realized that the impact of their journey had extended beyond justice. It had inspired reflection, change, and growth in people who had the power to make a difference. For the first time in a long while, Margaret felt a sense of peace. The darkness that had once threatened to swallow them whole had been pushed back, not erased, but transformed by their courage, their love, and their unwavering determination to be the light. Back at home, Margaret gathered with her daughters in their cozy living room, where laughter filled the air. It was a rare moment of calm amid the storm they'd navigated together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the room, they knew that, despite everything, they had triumphed. They were more than survivors, they were changemakers, proof that even the smallest spark of light could illuminate the darkest path. In the years that followed, Margaret and her daughters continued to evolve, their bond growing stronger with every challenge they overcame. Light in the Shadows flourished, transforming from a small nonprofit into a nationally recognized organization with chapters in multiple states. It became a lifeline for survivors, offering legal aid, counseling, and advocacy training. Survivors no longer felt alone. They had a community that empowered them to share their stories and demand justice. Lisa, now a young adult, found herself emerging as a leader within the movement. Her teenage years were marked by moments of self-doubt and the weight of her past trauma, but she channeled her experiences into something extraordinary. She traveled across the country, speaking at schools, hospitals, and conferences, sharing her story with a raw authenticity that moved hearts and ignited action. Each speech was a testament to her resilience and a rallying cry for change. She became known as a fearless advocative voice for those who had been silenced. One particularly meaningful moment came when Lisa met with a group of medical students. Standing in front of a lecture hall filled with bright, hopeful faces, she spoke candidly about the impact of negligence and the importance of empathy, accountability, and patient-centered care. When she finished, a young woman raised her hand, her voice trembling. "I want to be a doctor," she said, "because of you. Because I want to make a difference and never let something like this happen again." The words struck a chord deep within Lisa. She realized that her journey, as painful as it had been, was creating ripples of positive change. In that moment, she saw hope not just for herself, but for a system that was beginning to learn, adapt, and heal. Meanwhile, Winter had become a force in her own right. Her artwork, initially used as a tool to process her emotions, gained widespread acclaim. She created a series called Windows to Resilience, depicting moments of trauma and healing through a mix of vibrant and somber tones. Her work resonated with countless people, bridging the gap between pain and recovery. Galleries began featuring her art, and proceeds from her exhibitions funded scholarships for trauma survivors pursuing careers in the arts. At one of her exhibitions, a young girl with tear-filled eyes approached Winter and said, "Your paintings make me feel like I'm not alone." Winter hugged her tightly, understanding in that moment that her art was more than just a means of self-expression. It was a beacon of hope for others navigating their own darkness. Chryslyn, the youngest, chose a quieter path, but one no less powerful. She trained as a counselor and focused on providing support to children who had experienced trauma. Her ability to listen without judgment and offer genuine empathy made her a trusted figure in the community. Children opened up to her, feeling seen and heard in ways they hadn't before. Chryslyn often reflected on how her family's journey had shaped her path, giving her the strength and compassion to help others. Margaret, the matriarch who had sparked this journey with a single act of courage, continued to be a guiding light. She balanced her role as CEO of *** Light in the Shadows *** with her responsibilities as a mother and community leader. Though the demands were immense, she remained grounded in her purpose. She frequently met with lawmakers, pushing for reforms that prioritized patient safety and transparency in the medical field. Her efforts led to landmark legislation, including stricter oversight of medical professionals and mandatory reporting protocols for misconduct. Despite their successes, there were still moments of hardship. The weight of their past never truly disappeared. It lingered in quiet moments, in sudden memories, and in the scars they carried. But they faced those moments together, drawing strength from one another. Family therapy sessions became a place of healing, where they could share their fears, their hopes, and their dreams for the future. One evening, as the family gathered around their dining table, Margaret proposed an idea. "What if we created a retreat?" she asked. "A place where survivors can come together, heal, and find strength in one another?" The idea resonated deeply. Within months, the Haven Retreat was born, a serene space nestled in nature, where survivors and their families could find solace, engage in therapeutic activities, and rebuild their lives. Lisa led workshops on empowerment, Winter taught art therapy classes, and Chryslyn offered one-on-one counseling. Margaret oversaw it all, ensuring every guest felt safe and supported. The retreat became a symbol of their journey, a place where darkness met light, where wounds began to heal, and where hope blossomed. Survivors from all walks of life came to the Haven and left with renewed strength and a sense of belonging. The walls of the retreat were adorned with Winter's art, each piece telling a story of resilience, love, and transformation. One day, as Margaret walked through the retreat's gardens, she paused to watch her daughters laughing together. They were stronger now, each carrying their own scars, but also their own triumphs. In that moment, Margaret knew that their journey, though shaped by pain, had become a testament to the power of love, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And so, their story continued a story of healing, of giving back, and of shining light into the darkest corners of the world. Together, they reminded everyone they touched that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, hope could still grow, flourish, and change lives.